All right, class, simmer down. This is the second episode of TUNA School, and today we're going to be talking about privateering. Most folks know privateering as PvE, but that's a relatively inaccurate term, in my opinion. And I think it's probably the most fundamental way to earn ISK within the game. It's where the most action is for the actual game portion, and we're going to talk about that. By now, you should have already established your bases, your base of operations, and the logistical chain that gets your ships into position to actually play the game. But without further ado, let's define our terms. So, what does it mean to be a privateer? You can read the definition for yourself, but at least the one that Dr. Google provided. But basically, to be a privateer is to own your own ship, to call no one master, and to roam the galaxy as you see fit. When you first start the game, this is the way, right? You don't come into the game already having friends within the game. You don't have a corporation or alliance unless you're making an alt or you have prior experience. And for new players, it's kind of daunting to enter the galaxy and just be surrounded by nothing but reds and neutrals. Let's see. But it's also an adventure, right? You are in charge of your destiny. I don't know if any of you are fans of poetry, but one of my favorite poems out there is Invictus, and I think it's by William Ernest Henley. I can't remember the actual. Hopefully that's right. Someone correct me if I'm wrong there, and I'll give you a prize. Um, but off the top of my head, it's out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole. I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloodied but unbowed. And then I think, beyond the horror of the shade looms no. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. We are all secretly privateers of our own bodies, but in this game, this second universe, the same sort of behaviors and attitudes and styles of play can be applied, even just interacting with the game itself, not necessarily interacting with other players, but with the media the medium as it's set forward. So privateering, basically, your three currencies are bounties, loot, and reputation. It's essentially like Galaga or Space Invaders, but with people behind some of them. They're aliens. So there's two main styles of gameplay, and Folding Ideas recently did a really good video on this, a documentary about like why it's rude to play inefficiently in WoW. But one of the things he touches on is specifically is defining the styles of play. So there's free play and instrumental play. And what do I mean by that? Free play is playing just to have a good time. You're having fun. It's like settling down for a round of Mario Kart solo. Yeah, you're looking to get first place, but maybe you just want to go for a drive. You want to enjoy the shenanigans and nonsense that occurs. It's why I love flying destroyers is free play. That's the main motivation. Like I have a fantasy that I want to fulfill, and Echoes allows me to do that. Instrumental play is what how most of the player base seems to approach the game. They are looking to max perform their spaceships. They are looking to earn as much ISK in as little time as possible to open up more options. But they get stuck in a rut. They reach the end game. They free burn to end game. Have all the ISK that they could ever want, or lose a blingy ship and chuck their phone across the room. But they attain their goal and then realize that all of the journey that was available on the way up, all of the options that they had leading to those points, that they no longer interest them. They believe that they have done everything that exists within the game, and that is simply not true. They haven't tried to max perform really bad spaceships. They haven't tried to max perform individual anomaly levels or solve problems that don't necessarily result in guaranteed payoffs. So What is the fastest ship for destroying a T3 base anomaly, for example? Your first blush answer is probably going to be some battleship or battle cruiser, something big and bulky. I would put my money on the Hurricane just because of damage application. But there's other aspects that come into it. What's the fastest ship to speedrun 3 bases, for example? Then you're introducing transit time. You're introducing more of a logistical puzzle. And who's to say you have to do this alone, right? What is the fastest way to clear a tier 10 base with 3 players? That's a challenge that needs to be answered, and nobody's looking at it because it doesn't pay the best. But it pays in other ways. It pays in reputation, it pays in loot, and it pays in the effect that you have on the map. You achieve a strategic effect. You make other players dance to your music when you influence the map. And that's one of the cooler aspects to privateering within Eve Echoes. Like, you actually can influence the map and have an impact on the galaxy at large. Stealth bombers are cheap, and the war is upon us. Silent, as of last night, just declared war on everybody, which I am looking forward to that content. And if you're new to the game, there has never been a better time to enter and jump in and join in a fleet. You want to see 100+ dudes duke it out with 120, 130+ dudes and see which side wins out. See who has the discipline, see who has the defenses, the forethought, the planning. Offering your services and having the option, like having the understanding of how to fight and when to fight, where to fight, those kind of things. Reaching out and talking to folks within the game, that's the best way to do it, right? And to do that reaching out, you got to play. You got to actually move around. You got to privateer and look for content. You've got to create your own content. Let's see. I kind of went off on a tangent, but I want to point out the difference between trainer ships and normal vessels. So, pop quiz. Why is the Rupture trainer about double the cost of a standard issue Rupture at the moment? You get less performance, you pay double the cost, and it's fundamentally a weaker ship. Like, right? It does not have the same number of slots. It doesn't have the same bonuses. I think it has the same bonuses. I'm not 100% on that. I'm not going to commit an answer one way or another there for those looking for things to correct me on. But it's worse. You pay more for less on the surface. The reason why it's more expensive is, one, lack of demand for the baseline Rupture. There are tankier options out there in the cruiser class, and it's one that, doesn't get a lot of love compared to its cousin, the Stabber. But two, the IP, the insurance point cost of any trainer vessel, is significantly reduced. Ships were made for sinking, and trainer ships are specially fit out, specially made to be made for sinking as much as possible. They are where you learn the lessons this game offers. You bring a lack of capabilities, true, but if you get a fleet of trainers together, you get buddies who are learning the game as well, you will be surprised and impressed with what your team can pull off, even with ships that lack capability. And once you've got those basic mechanics, that understanding of how to approach and attack situations under your belt, you will be far more deadly with a standard issue ship of the same variety. So what I'd like you to do is experiment with trainers if you're a new player. But if you're an old player, and this is a fun little experiment, go to a nullsec ITC when not performing war activities, and just buy a trainer and civilian type stuff, set aside whatever ISK you have, and see if you can make it out the gates in nullsec. You'll be surprised what they can pull off. You can find small anomalies, drag out and whittle away the fast-moving ships, and basically nibble until you can afford something newer. And you build up on that single ship from there. You start from scratch while keeping the rest of your fleet, everything else that you own, and you'll find this is an entirely new game. You'll have the option to take shortcuts based on your wealth and some of the other options you have. But it's a way to reintroduce and reframe the experience if you ever find yourself running out of things to do. Common complaint on Reddit is, I've done everything there is to do. I'm going to win Eve by quitting. Which, true, you're going to win Eve by quitting. That is the only way to truly win Echoes or Eve Online. But there are a million things within the games that you haven't, within either game, that you haven't done. You have not talked to every individual. You haven't done the political intrigue or the negotiations or understanding on either side of any debate. You have done your story within the game. And your story continues outside the game too, right? Like, your interactions within the game are no different than, well, I mean, they are different because they're fantasy fulfillment, but they come from the same place as your interactions outside. So, you can either speedrun to the end or have a good time. Stop and smell the roses. Take a sip of tea and just enjoy yourself. When it comes to PvE and interactions with other players when you're out on your own as a private individual, there are different types and tiers of anomalies. Tier 1 is the weakest. It's just a slurry of frigates, and they're tiny and they pop like bubbles. They are really easy to kill. That is where you start. Everyone in this game started at 0, right? And it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. There are different types of anomalies within those tiers. So a tier 1 small and a tier 1 medium, you have more ships within a medium. It's slightly more difficult, right? That's the expectation. And because of that increased difficulty, you have more opportunities for bounty, more profit. The most common, I would assume, size anomaly is probably around the average. I would assume the most common is about 5, 6, in that range. That's what you want to be tuning for, because wherever you go, you will have a ship capable of tackling that PvE content. Assuming you don't want to go where everybody else goes and just get the best out of the content that exists, right? If you want to travel, having something that will pay the bills wherever you go is how you do it. So there's normal types of anomalies, small, mediums, and larges. Those appear in every system except for ITCs. And if you kill those smalls, mediums, or larges, eventually there's a percentage chance that a scout or inquisitor anomaly of the same level will spawn. And these anomalies have special loot boxes at the end of them. They're kind of like dungeons. You can generate dungeons through continued effort. You go from one warp gate to the next, and you've got to go through those warp gates. So if you go into a warp gate that has for a scout, and you see that there are no ships there, that is human sign. Someone has been there and killed those ships before you got there. So either be ready for a fight in the next one or move on. But those scouts and inquisitors are randomly generated based on the number of smalls, mediums, and larges killed in those systems. That's when the game first started. That was probably the best way to earn ISK, because the prizes at the bottom of the box were a lot more rare. We were all learning them and gaining them at the same rates. And then there's dead spaces. Dead spaces are spooky territories. They are gates to another, I assume, dimension or set of space, like area, not area within our universe or our space, but kind of like a pocket dimension. In those dead spaces, you'll usually find the hardest types of enemies within those tiers. I can tell you firsthand, a T6 dead space is possible to do in a sniper cruiser of any stripe solo, but it is extremely painful, and you basically have to cheese the system to make it happen, right? Dead spaces are best performed with a group. Those are your raids, your raid equivalent. And then there's the bigger special anomalies, but we're not going to get into those because that is high tier content, and I want you to enjoy the road to the top. And the best way that I think folks can enjoy that road to the top is start tuning ships to tackle bases. People will tell you, don't attack the pirate bases, and they're telling you that for selfish reasons. You should burn the land. You should salt the earth where your enemies live. You should destroy the bases where you live, because the bases will come back over time. As people destroy small, medium, and larges, those bases will more quickly level up, going from Tech 1 or Tier 1 back to whatever their original tier was. And I think it averages out to about a week tops. So you can get a rotation going every week. One of the things that I like to do from Ostingalay is I go to the high sec bases and clean those out. Because there's no harm, like nobody can attack you when you're attacking a base in high sec. It's a third of a million ISK for 0 effort. I have to use a brain cell, if that, to clear it out. And it's just guaranteed income. There's no risk. There are times within the game, and this is the main thrust of this slide, where it's more fun not to risk anything. Just go and putz around. Mess around in a rifter, right? Like, that is enjoyable. It's not all of your time has to be on the clock. You don't have to be making the maximum amount of ISK that you can make at any given point, right? Like, I've got a Raven Striker, but no skills in it because battleships are boring. They are fundamentally boring. If you want to experience being a turret, an auto turret, so you don't even have to really aim, battleships are the key for, like, are the PvE tool of choice for you. But if you want to actually interact with the game and spend time trying to achieve specific goals, challenging yourself, because you determine like how challenging things are. You can take a Rifter into a T10 and see how long you can survive. You can take a T10 battleship into a tier 1 base or anomaly and just raffle stomp all of the rats there. You determine what you do. The meta and general advice doesn't necessarily have to. So the destruction of bases isn't just a bid for free play. The destruction of bases is also a strategic effect because you affect the map when you destroy them. And there's different ways to calculate out, if you're a number cruncher or a data analyst or of some stripe, how worthwhile your interactions can be over time. If you've got the Concord Pass set up, and it's one of my favorite mechanics within the game, the Concord Pass, you can try and maximize kills per minute. And in so doing, you'll discover the fastest way, the speed run way to clear whatever you're tackling. Or you can focus on bounties per anomaly. You can focus on trying to just get as much out of the anomaly as possible. So kills per minute is how most folks approach things. They want to maximize their ticks because of commendations. And I cannot emphasize this enough. There are players who've been around for a year plus who don't know the commendation system, but we'll get to that. Sometimes, if you want Concord points, you're going to want to kill as many rats as possible as quickly as possible. And that's one form of victory, right? You have the biggest pile of bodies. They were cheap. They didn't, net you very much income, but you managed to rack up kills. That's fun in its own right. Or there's bounties per anomaly. You want to find the anomalies that offer the greatest overall ISK earnings. Commendations are not a factor. You don't mind burning multiple commendations. And just going for accepting reduced bounty ticks, but also reduced risk over time, right? The faster you go, the more likely you are to make a mistake. The higher tier or the more difficult the content, the more likely you are to get ganked and have your toys stolen and broken. I'm going to let y'all in on a secret. One of the dormant realms features these signal candles or whatever you want to call them that you need to destroy around the same time. And the way players do that is they whittle them down to the lowest amount of hull possible and then blap them one after another, like shooting cans off of a fence post. Boom, 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 boom. You can do the same thing with pirates. If you want to combine the two, the optimal way to approach any specific pirate base or anomaly is to first off, kill the enemy Logi. Logi should be your primary in most situations. You don't want them healing. You don't want them bringing ships from the brink of destruction back to a point where they'll slow your roll. But you kill the Logi, and then you reduce your enemies down to where you think they'll die within one volley of whatever weapon system you're using. And then you assign a gun or missile or drone or whatever you have to each of them, and just rack up as many kills in as short a period of time as possible. And that's how you get the big ticks. You do that multiple times across an anomaly because enemies come in multiple waves. That's how you maximize, or kind of fuse the two approaches. So that's worth noting. Commendations. So I've mentioned commendations before, and what that is if you go into your wallet, and you can do this as I talk. Go into your wallet and filter, upper right hand corner right next to the X, filter by bounty. Bounty rewards, I believe is what it's called. Once you do that, it'll show you all of the bounty ticks that you've achieved, going from most recent to farthest back in time. And you hit that little eye, that little information button to the right of each of those paydays. And depending on the number of bounties that you have, or commendations that you have, which you get those from running missions, but depending on the number of commendations you have, you can double your income. And this was introduced primarily to make it so botting was less effective. Back when that was kind of a major deal, you had a lot of automated routers, and this it's basically at a limit, a release valve on the amount of grinding needed. Right? So make sure you're doing that for the big ticks, especially. If I tend to use it on anything over 1 million. I especially since I don't really go for, I'm not a fan of the grind. I am in this game for the fun of it. And it's nice to get paid for stuff I was going to do anyway. And I recommend you aiming for the same. Last point about the parameters that you set within your privateering career, assuming that that's what you want to do for the long haul, because there's a lot of depth and opportunity within it. Though a lot of the grognards and folks who have been around for ages will tell you that's just not the way. Consider your gross income versus your net income versus the profit that you're looking to establish, right? You want to build up over time, which means you want to invest wisely. If you're satisfied with the gameplay that you're receiving, maybe you want to expand your operation and try new things at that tier, at that level, right? You can navigate up the tiers, you can navigate laterally across the tiers and the different ships in the tree, or some combination of the two. I tend to jump all over the place and find that offers the most novelty and enjoyment. But some folks don't play this game for novelty or enjoyment. They play this game for performance and expression of competency, which, let's not get into the psychology behind that. But consider how much you take in with your ratting career. Add in considerations for losses, right? Because if a ship can replace itself right quick, it is a good ship. If a ship cannot replace itself as quickly, it is less. It achieves a weaker performance overall or over time than another. So what do I mean by that? Ships were made for sinking. Every one of your investments will eventually get destroyed, whether that's from you leaving the game or from other players' interactions, or some combination of the two. Pirates will kill you and surprise you every now and then. I lost a Tall War sniper pulling a T4 base yesterday, which that's a very rare occurrence, but they managed to web me down and scram me, which embarrassing, but also when I'm only out 14 IP for, what wasn't supposed to earn ISK, just burn time. I don't mind that. You take those losses into consideration when calculating your net income over time. And profit is what you set aside, not necessarily for the operations that you have in hand, but to pay yourself for the future, to pay future you. So figuring out what you bring in overall, subtracting what you lose from what you bring in overall and the different expenditures that you plan to make, and then setting aside a little rainy day money, a little savings, whether that's set aside within assets, like I like to do, I invest in assets, or set aside within your wallet where it's easily accessible and not necessarily, put to work for you, but something that you can use freely, is entirely up to you. You set the parameters not only for your interactions within the galaxy, but for your choices, for your actions as an individual. However, you are not alone. This is a massively multiplayer online sandbox. There are, at most recent count, the latest war has about 21,000 players involved, give or take some change, right? And that's silent versus everybody. 21,000 people fighting. Pick a side, and maybe, you'll find yourself marching lockstep with fellow pilots of similar intent. Maybe you'll come across random neutrals out there in the void who, you don't know if they're friend or foe. They could be a predator, they could be prey, they could be an ally in the future. And then also people who want your stuff, who want to kill you, if only for the pride of taking that kill mark. You need to consider the threats that exist out there, but also the people aren't tools. But the tools that they use and the people that you have alongside you on your journey, like, you need to take them into consideration. So starting out as a privateer, keep an eye out for friends, keep an eye out for enemies. Picking someone, as a rival just based on their name alone, that's a story right there. That's a good time waiting to happen. Look at the wider universe and the population within it, and try and find your place in it. Whether that's a niche within privateering and just killing rats, or maybe you're more into the social aspects of the game, right? Or maybe you just want to kill people and take their things. All viable options. Just understand that going in, and you should be good for the long haul. So I touched on this briefly when I was talking about setting the parameters, but as in life, you have two resources in total that you can use for any given situation. You have your time and your effort, and you really don't have that much time. In the grand scheme of things, your expected life expectancy, whatever it is just a blip. It is a blink. It's little more than a flash in the pan. So use it wisely. Use it enjoying yourself more than trying to attain the approval of strangers. Unless the approval of strangers is where you bring your enjoyment from. So figure out how long do you really want to spend in this game, right? If your play sessions are about 2 minutes every couple days or so, maybe you're better off playing the planetary interaction aspects of this game, the passive income type aspects of this game to slowly build your wealth over time. Transport missions are really good for people who don't want to invest a lot of time and attention, right? Because you just set for safest or avoid nullsec, and you can move boxes wherever they need to be moved for relatively low cost. It takes a little bit of seed money, a little bit of initial investment, but if you did the tutorial, then you should have all that squared away. I'll cover that. I'll cover those careers in future episodes. Privateering is your first introduction to some of the gameplay that exists, though. And I tend to block things out in about hour-long chunks. That's about as long as I can pay attention to anything with maximum effort. And I'll usually have like an audiobook or some music going on in the background. That's where the playlists come from that I show in the Keep It Brief every week. But it's about an hour every time I sit down to play, and different times throughout the week. It all really depends on my real life schedule. But I know that you've got your real life schedule, your friends and family and work considerations that go into it. Plan accordingly. What's the quality of the play that you want? Do you want a difficult experience, a hard encounter? Or do you want it to be easy? Do you want to AFK? And depending on the quality of play, like depending on how much attention and enjoyment you will gain from that attention, that's what you should use to determine your targets. Those parameters that I discussed earlier. As in all things, there's a bit of risk associated with your actions. Even high-sec rats will occasionally bring you down. It really depends. But overall, I think If you want to be a player in this game, your goal should be to play the game, not be managed by it. Don't get played by the game, right? If you find yourself doing the same thing day in, day out, grinding to make that paycheck, you have become NetEase's wage slave. And there's some enjoyment in max performing. There is something to be gained, specifically ISK, which allows you to do other things, from fulfilling expectations, right? And going with what the meta demands. But life is too short not to have fun. Enjoy the game as it exists at the tiers lower than what you've attained. Don't be afraid to go back and dust off some of those ships that, you flew back in the day. See how they perform differently. Throw them against challenges that you think will be too much for them and change your tactics, right? Draw out your enemy. Make sure your approaches set you up for future attacks. There's a lot more tactical depth and nuance available within the game than I think people give it credit for. So that's your homework for this session, for this episode. I want you to do a time and attention check. What do you want ISK for? What do you intend to enjoy within the game? Is it playing the game itself? Is it the status that comes from having a fatty wallet? Is it options? You want to attain enough ISK so you can do whatever you want and then have no idea what you want to do? What are your goals? So with that, I want to cover basically some errata text from the first from last week's Keep It Brief 4. Fleahound corrected me on the Heron Cove ops. It doesn't actually receive bonuses to its scanning. I was incorrect there, but it does have the best scanning radius as far as I'm aware. So it's still a good introductory ship for exploration. It's just not as good as people would hope. And then Crazy Canadian actually clarified something for me on the damage profile for modified modules. I think they're better than grays and less than greens. And during the episode where I talked about different module types, I wasn't too clear on that. So special thanks to Canadian for that. I owe you a prize. As always, this is how my schedule looks for the most part. I get most of my gaming done on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. Please come fly with me. I'm going to do an episode of Tuna School every Friday, and as the number of lectures grows, hopefully I'll have more questions, and y'all have more content to look back on and get refreshers for. If you have any comments or criticisms, as always, I'm going to post a link to the slides down in the doobly-doo. Here's what we have slated for future episodes. As I mentioned earlier, planetary interaction was that was actually what got me hooked on this game, was PI. And a lot of folks look at that like it's boring, it's passive income. But there's a little bit more depth than I think people give it credit for. And then the episode after that, I'm going to talk about battle buddies and playing with other friends, other people, and how that complicates things and makes this way more tactically interesting. Small gang PvP is my favorite. A lot of pilots tend to prefer massive fleet actions, and those have a special sense of awe and wonder and impressive performance associated with them. But more often than not, I tend to view those as kind of like watching a Civil War fight. Whereas I want a brawl. I want an actual give and take, some tactical depth. Like, I have no idea what this situation demands, but I'm going to give it this strategy and see how that pans out. And I think that's best attained with 2, 3, 4, 5 people in your wheelhouse. So that's what the Battle Buddies episode will be about. Seventh Circle Bar and Pleasure House, that's going to be about some of my fanfic nonsense, and that's around the same time as Christmas or whatever, the end of the year, New Year's. So that should be the holiday special, if you will. And then from there on, I'm going to cover additional topics. That's the goal moving forward. So I will see you next Friday. Extra credit for this episode, Overly Sarcastic Productions. I absolutely love Red and Blue. I've watched these two for years, and they have just steadily improved, and the sense of humor and the topics that they cover, they are really into myths and history. Story tropes, trope talks. Red actually just released trope talks today about idiot plots, and since I enjoy writing, the trope talks and the different discussions about ancient media and history. History is just a story, right? And often stranger than fiction. But this is probably my favorite YouTube channel, period. Dot. Like for real world stuff. I hope you take a look and maybe you'll enjoy it too. I especially love their discussion of the Greek gods, Artemis, Apollo, Dionysus. I think this is Psyche and Eros, but I'm not 100%. Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Hermes, Ares, Athena, like Gaia. I don't remember the different ones. Like, it's just really cool, fun, enjoyable. Like, throw it on, enjoy the art, enjoy the conversation, enjoy Red singing, enjoy how much Blue loves domes. It's an enjoyable channel, and one that I think is applicable to Echoes in that you can better define and understand stories, right? And you'll get a better appreciation for the history of the server. The different wars that have occurred follow and mirror naval combat to some extent. The Pan-Gen War, for example, there was a bit of maneuvering that really changed the war in favor of the victors, and being able to like compare to other portions of history, whether that's from land battles or trade routes and discussions along those lines, like it is a great channel for that. It's not the perfect channel for that, and I'll probably talk about one of those in the future, or what I think are the best for history. But Blue does an amazing job of making history accessible and fun. And Red is, yeah, I'm done gushing. As I said earlier this week, I'm looking for playtesters. Me and a buddy are making a game. I won't go over this slide in too much detail, but if you're interested in playing Blackjack as a roguelike, hit me up. That's what I do Saturdays when I'm not playing Echoes. And that should conclude, that does conclude today's lesson. Hopefully it was useful. Hopefully, if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the comments, or feel free to message me on Reddit. I'm always down to talk. I hope you all have a good day and a happy weekend, and I look forward to talking to you next Friday. Well, Monday if you're into the Keep It Brief. But yeah, bye.